Hello, everyone. Hello, Royals fans. Welcome in Ain't No Seats podcast. Special guest tonight, my guy, Jack Johnson, one of my good friends. He's one of the greatest guys you could meet, not just hyping you up. Huge baseball nerd in a great way, loves the Royals. Jack, heading into today, you're obviously 3 games back in the AL Central. You're playing the first place Guardians. I mean, you lose both, you could be 5 back. You win both, you could be 1 back. The Royals go ahead, win both games in Cleveland. How are you feeling? How are the vibes?
Man, how can you not feel pumped up considering I think the way that a lot of people felt yesterday of you get smoked, you get your ass kicked by Philly back-to-back nights, and then you've got a Cleveland team that took the final 2 games against the Rangers, and you put yourself in a really difficult situation going into this series of not only do you have to go to Cleveland, it's a doubleheader to kick things off. And it always felt like in past years Cleveland was like this house of horrors for them. Now, Target Field truly is the house of horrors, but you look at Progressive Field and what it's been like for the Royals. It's been a struggle for them, and to go out there today and not once but twice have a lackluster start and then find a way to run away with that game. It's what makes this team so special, man. I mean, every time you feel like this could be it. And, I've not really gotten to that point where the downfall was happening, right? I think there's been moments this year where in the back of your mind, you're going, is this where they hit the wall? Is this where it all happens? And that's happened almost every single week since the 8-game winning streak back in May. But time and time and again, they come through. And this was far more impressive than their doubleheader sweep against St. Louis. And the way they did it in both games, falling behind early, and then just piecing together good at bats. And your 34-year-old captain, coming through tonight. I mean, he's having, a decade's worth of hits like that, just coming through in big time moments. And I firmly believe at this point, he's going to get his opportunity in October again, because I'm sure we'll finish up about the time the Red Sox game is ending. They're about to hold a playoff spot by 6.5 games. But after tonight, you can screw all that talk. Let's focus on the division, because a win tomorrow gets them in first place.
Yes, absolutely. And you brought up Salvi. I was going to talk about plenty of things. I mean, the first inning was obviously a nightmare in the field. We don't really even need to go deep into that. I was in full meltdown mode, but the offense, like you said, they've just battled all year. But Salvi today, 5 for 7, 2 homers, 2 doubles, 1 single. He had 13 total bases. And when Salvi's spitting on pitches in the dirt and taking pitches and being selective, that's when I feel like I know he's about to lock in. And this is the time of the year where they obviously need him to produce. He's got 90 plus RBIs now, 3 guys with 90 plus in that offense. Salvi, like, what a day. He 2 jacks, 2-run shot, and then a grand slam, won someone $25,000. The second one was about 500 feet. Rex Hudler almost probably did have an orgasm, but Salvi has done it time and time again, and I can't wait to see what he looks like in the postseason, because it is looking likely. I wanted to talk about Alec Marsh. Obviously, the first 3 hitters get on via hit. The third one was Jose Ramirez hit a liner, but Blanco obviously misplayed it. So gave up 3 hits to the first 3 hitters, and then he only gave up 2 hits the rest of the game. Homer to, who was it? Schneemann? Was Schneemann the one who hit it?
Schneemann, yep.
And then the little blooper by Jose Ramirez. So I thought Marsh was better than, I guess, the scoreboard would show. I think he only had 2 earned. But what did you think about Marsh's start, his first start back from Omaha?
Yeah, it reminded me a lot of that outing he had against St. Louis. And it was, of course, a doubleheader. So it was game 1 of that doubleheader at Busch Stadium. And things didn't look that good early on, but he still was getting the swing and miss. Felt like there was some good pitches that the Cardinals just hit. And I got that similar vibe tonight from him, that even though he gave up 3 runs in the first, you just knew that it was a matter of time before the Royals got on to Logan Allen. And Logan Allen, at no point in that game, looked comfortable. I mean, the Royals were, putting cannon shots off their bats. I mean, they had like 6 or 7 balls in the first 4 innings that were over 100, miles per hour with their exit velocity. So I felt good about where Marsh was at even after it was 3-0, because there was some bad luck there, right? There was the misplay by Dairon Blanco. And, if he were to get through the second and third, you feel like the Royals had a really good chance. But I view him in a way that is more of a Swiss Army knife. I view him as a bit of a hybrid. I don't think that because of tonight, he's going to work back into the rotation and you go with a 6-man rotation. I think what this is going to be is, kind of working him in certain situations like that, but also being utilized in the way Daniel Lynch was tonight, where he can go 2 or 3 innings and maybe, pick up those final 6 to 9 outs when you're up by 5 runs, or maybe bridge that gap like we saw on Sunday when it was 5-2 and the game wasn't over, but you had to go to Angel Serpa and Will Smith and they completely imploded. I think Alec Marsh will be a very valuable piece for this team moving forward. And because of that, it gives them that flexibility. It gives them that depth and gives them that length. And it was nice to be able to turn to somebody like him in game 2, where the Guardians had to go with a bullpen game in game 1 because they just didn't really have somebody to turn to because Logan Allen was already starting that night.
Yeah. I guess a lot of people, and I feel like you know this better than anyone, but we haven't really been familiar with the playoff format for a while. It's obviously been since 2015. So there's been a lot of talk about what arms might head to the pen, who might be in the pen for the playoffs entirely. If you had to guess right now, I guess who would your front 3 starters be to start? And then who would you move to the pen and who would you have in the pen entirely for the Royals?
Yeah, I think even with Lugo's struggles, you're probably looking at Reagans, Lugo, and Waka. I think that they're going to stay consistent with those top 3 guys. Brady Singer's been really good, but I like him in that situation where if Lugo kind of looks like the way he did against Philadelphia on Sunday or against the Twins early on a couple weeks ago on that Tuesday, you can turn to Brady Singer out of the bullpen in the game 2 scenario. But I don't think, unless Seth Lugo is just completely out of gas by the end of September, that they would turn to somebody else. And I honestly love the thought of, if it was the wild card series, let's say in this hypothetical, they don't win the division, they just get a wild card spot and you have to win that best of 3. I like going to Michael Wacha maybe in a game 3 winner take all scenario, right? I think that, him being your hottest pitcher over the last 15 to 16 starts, that's really, really good to have, because you look around the American League, how many teams have that good of a number 3 or as hot of a number 3 as Michael Wacha? I mean, that's what's made this team so dangerous. And now they have I think the 3rd best OPS, and either in the second half or the month of August. I'd have to go back and look at that stat. You pair that all together, let's be honest, I don't think anybody wants to see the Royals right now in October because of the pressure they'll have on them, which is non-existent. Let's all be honest here. The national pressure on the Royals will not be there. It's on Baltimore. It's on New York. It's on Minnesota. Hell, it's on Cleveland too, because, they've had this division by 10 or 11 games for months, and then they've crumbled down the stretch here. So the Royals, to me, are that darling in the American League where they're an awesome story, but also nobody wants to run into because of that rotation, because of some of the guys in that lineup. And if this bullpen can start to piece together some things, hell, that might be one of the more dangerous teams you could face in the American League.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like people nationally don't really respect the Royals. And there are days where I question how good we are. And I think it's just because they don't have playoff experience. Obviously, you have Salvi, but they said it. We just said it to start the pod. They got 3 guys with 90-plus RBIs, the only team in baseball. Bobby Witt Jr. is obviously one of the best players in the world. Salvi's a World Series MVP. Vinny, obviously 90-plus. So I feel fine about the lineup. And the guy we got to talk about, well, first off, we got to talk about JJ and his accusations at the deadline. And Paul DeJong, he's hitting 296 since the break, 4 homers. He hit another one tonight. The Royals were down 3-0, and he hits a bomb to cut it to 3-1. How damn good was JJ at the trade deadline and in the off season also?
Yeah, but man, you look at what JJ has done, not just this deadline, but since taking over. I remember there was this, pitting feeling in the fan base of when he took over. It was, he's been Dayton's right-hand man for 20 years. So how different can he really be? And in that first year, he didn't really have the record to prove anything. They lost 106 games, but even some of those minor moves they made, and to go after, it was starting with going after Aroldis Chapman and flipping him for Reagans and getting a lottery ticket throw in. And then in the offseason, making it a point of emphasis of we're getting starting pitching, we're getting bullpen help. And not all the moves have worked out, but a lot of them have. And a lot of them have worked out better than anybody could have thought of. But then you get to this trade deadline and you get Lucas Ursig, who, in my opinion, I've had the most confidence in him as a reliever, I mean, since anybody than Wade Davis, right? Even Scott Barlow in his prime, I didn't have that much confidence as I do with Lucas Ursig. This stuff's just too electric, and you have him maybe for 4 or 5 more years. Paul DeYoung, what was kind of one of those cheap pickups and those cheap options, maybe a plan B or plan C guy, but he's already done more than you possibly could have imagined, playing 3 to 4 times a week in this Royals lineup. And that to me just shows you the type of general manager that he is, how he's also backed up, him saying he's going to be transactional. He was going to try to put a winner here in Kansas City. And look, they're pacing to do something historic, to go from that many losses in 1 year to maybe as many as 90 wins the next year. That's incredible, man. And even if this doesn't result in a playoff series win, I mean, they're running away with the playoff spot right now. I mean, Boston's crumbling at this point. Tampa's crumbled. Cleveland is crumbling right now. They're going to be a playoff team, but they may not win the division now. Minnesota can't catch fire right now. I mean, they've played well, but they can be wishy-washy. To me, Braden, I mean, it's just been such a dream season, all things considered here. And J.J. Picollo and John Sherman are a big, big reason of that with how they've assembled this team.
Yeah, they spent money in the offseason. They were active at the trade deadline when some people, I mean, they question if they should be active, if this was actually a contender. The Urseg trade was huge. Can you believe that bum walked someone today? First walk as a Royal. But yeah, he's been
Ramirez too.
Yeah, I think I had piss running down my leg when Fry hit a laser to third base, but that was a hell of a play by Michael. I guess another thing we haven't really talked about is MJ Melendez. And this has been going on for a while. I mean, me and you went to Kauffman about a month ago or so, and we had talked about the ABs MJ's been putting together. He'll get a hit or he'll draw a walk, but regardless, he's putting together long at bats. If he does get out, he's hitting line drives. He's hitting the ball hard. I was looking in August, he's 20 for 59, hitting 339. He has more RBIs than strikeouts. How unbelievable has he been lately, just hitting the ball? And obviously he made one of the best catches of the year for the Royals this afternoon that honestly might have saved them the game.
This is second half MJ Melendez. We saw it last year. I don't know if it's the All-Star break. I don't know if it's just the opportunity to reset or anything like that. But there's a reason, right? There is a reason why the Royals didn't give up on him back in April and May. And even when he got to those struggles of hitting 150, and you might be wondering to yourself, why the hell is he still being run out there, right? Why are they still doing this? And to me, I just chalk it up to, look, you can question moves that Matt Quatrero makes, or why J.J. Picollo doesn't call this guy up, or why don't they just DFA this guy? They got their reasons because they're around these guys every single day. They watch the work these guys do. And I don't think there was ever a question of work ethic. I think that MJ Melendez was doing really well, like not in the game scenario. I think when he was taking BP, when he was doing his work, everything looked good. And then the game would roll around and different story there. But there was this belief of, man, you're not going to give up on him because there is that ceiling there. He's got immense power, immense raw power. We were in the clubhouse last week in the what series was that? I'm already blanking. Was it the
Angels?
Angels, yes, the Angels series finale of that one. We're down in the clubhouse, and it was after MJ had his one-handed home run. Like, how many guys on this team can just have a one-handed home run? And not many, I can tell you. There's a lot of power to his game, and the fact that he's improved defensively, it's made it all the better. And I think it's also a great story, right? That, he was the scapegoat for a big portion of the first half. It was, him and Hunter Renfroe. This was before the Garrett Hampson days of trying to criticize him. It was, man, they can't play Hunter Renfroe and MJ Melendez anymore. I'd even gotten to the point where I'm thinking, this Hunter Renfroe deal is not working out. Like, they just need to move on from that. I was all right with MJ staying because of the upside. But I was starting to think to myself, Hunter Renfroe, he's past his prime. This is just not the guy you want anymore. He was DFA'd by the Angels last year, and they got picked up by the Reds. But they were around those guys every single day, even Kyle Isbell, right when he struggled, and they stuck with him, and things got better. And that's why this team is so close. There's so much chemistry, and they love the coaching staff because they believe in these guys. They knew these guys were going to be able to turn things around. And as you said, that's why it feels so good to root for MJ Melendez. And could I say that I saw it coming? Not to this level. I thought he'd improve because the bar was so low. But yeah, Braden, I mean, we were at the game not too long ago, and it's, things are starting to turn around for him. He's starting to put together better at-bats. He's working deep into the count. He's hitting the ball harder. And here we are. It feels like every time he comes up to the plate, you've got that confidence that he's going to come through.
Yeah, and that you're getting me excited about the lineup as a whole now because, well, someone just said it. If Michael gets hot, it's game over. I don't know what to expect from Michael. I just know he's been hitting the ball harder lately. Massey's put together some good at bats, even though he's had trouble fielding routine grounders, letting pop-ups drop. But think about it. You get a guy at leadoff that's putting together good at bats and hitting it hard, backed by one of the best players in the world, a guy that has almost 100 RBIs behind him, then Salvi, and then you have protection with MJ, who's as hot as anyone in the lineup, probably not named Bobby Witt, which that guy's insane because it felt like he was cooling off and he's still hitting like 500 over the last or since the break or whatever it is. But yeah, you got those guys with 90 plus RBIs and then you have protection behind them, especially when Renfroe's coming back from injury. I mean, you talk about this brutal stretch, the 20 games, and I'm kind of just chalking off game by game after they happen. I mean, you're 5 games into it now and you're 3-2, and that's without Renfroe. So if you can just weather the storm, I'm going to feel amazing, obviously. This Cleveland series, obviously a 4-gamer, you've won the first 2. What has to happen over the next 2 days for you to feel satisfied about this series?
If I'm just going to be conservative here, I'll be frustrated about, being right there tomorrow and they have a chance to jump into first place because now they've, leapfrogged Minnesota. I'll feel frustrated, but to me, they've done kind of what they needed to do. I mean, in this gauntlet, it's all about treading water for me. And if you can tread water, you're going to be playing in October. Now, if we're talking about positioning and getting a home playoff game, which a lot of people are in Kansas City would consider as, what their bar is, not so much just getting into the postseason, because there are people I know that don't want to see them get into the playoffs, go to Baltimore for the wild card series and get swept in 2 games. I wouldn't be happy either, but 2 or 3 weeks after the season would be over, I think that was one hell of a season, right? And this is just the beginning of what they can accomplish. But as for this Cleveland series, I think what's baffling about this matchup, and I want to say that we talked about this, of the matchups between the Royals in Cleveland and the Royals in Minnesota. I think the Royals and Twins don't match up well at all. I think Minnesota is an awful matchup for Kansas City. And the good thing is I don't think they'll meet each other in the postseason unless they get to the American League Championship Series. However, I've always felt like the Royals were a good matchup with Cleveland because of the struggling rotation. It's not a typical Cleveland rotation. They've got guys that don't work deep into the games. They've got a typical Cleveland bullpen, but this was a team that, going into that first game against Kansas City, they never truly put fear in me, even as good as their record looked. And you think about it, the Royals are 6-2 after tonight against Cleveland on the year. Those 2 losses, the Royals had a 5-0 lead with Seth Lugo on the mound, and they blew it. That Bobby Witt Jr. error. The second loss was that controversial home run off the pole by Noel. So, yeah, I mean, we're talking foul ball there. Not that, that dictates everything. There were still innings to be played. It was a big moment. But that's crazy to think that there were 2 games right there that could have gone in the Royals' favor. Now, let me say this. That second game in Cleveland, after they had blown the 5-0 lead, the Royals, found a way to come back in that one, and the Cleveland bullpen blew that. So they likely look at that and say, hey, that was a game that we gave away to the Royals. But they're 6-2 against this team. I don't think this group has ever feared Cleveland. And I'll tell you this, and I'll tell people that are listening live right now, going back to spring training when I was down there, all the time of covering this team, seeing them in the All-Star game, they were one of the most confident groups I had seen, and there really wasn't anybody that scared them. I truly believe the confidence that exuded from them from February to now, they feel like they can beat anybody. And even on nights where, you get frustrated where they don't beat Philadelphia or Boston, they don't dwell on games like that as long as maybe the fans do, right? They're already on to the next thing. In fact, after tonight, they don't even care that they swept this Cleveland team. They're already focusing on tomorrow. And that's what's made them so good. And it's a direct correlation to them not being swept more than once this year and only losing 4 in a row. That was the most they've lost this year in a row. And that's why you should have so much confidence in them in this gauntlet. They may not play well every single night. There's not going to be times where they come back from a 3-0 deficit, but they just flush those games so quickly. They do not care. And that, I don't mean that as care as like if they don't play well, they're frustrated, but they're not showing up to the ballpark the next day still thinking about the night before. They're already focused on what's ahead. And that's after games like tonight. They feel good about the way they looked. You celebrate in the clubhouse a little bit, back to the hotel. We're already focused on Michael Lorenzen taking the ball in game 3.
Yeah. And that's obviously, I'm not going to say this stretch hasn't scared me. Like this is a stretch Royals fans have seen, Royals fans have talked about for months. But going into this stretch, that's kind of what I thought about is there's 7 of those 20 games are against Cleveland. And they've looked good against Cleveland this year. You talked about the 2 losses. It's not like Cleveland has given it to Kansas City. And yes, that foul ball, Cleveland obviously still could have won that game, but it changed the momentum a ton. But this is the thing that I get the most excited about, and I get way too excited just talking about it. But there's obviously 30 games left, plenty of baseball to go. If the Royals win the Central, or whoever wins the Central, you have a really, really good chance of getting a bye in the playoffs. Just fast forwarding to the ALDS, and you're 1 series away from the American League Championship Series, because even the Royals right now are a couple games ahead of Houston. So the top 2 division winners, which is probably going to be the AL East winner, will get the 1 seed, and then the 2 seed will probably come from the American League Central. And the Royals are 1 game back in the Central after being 3 back at 11 a.m. this morning. They're 1 back in the Central with 30 games to go. They could legit be the 2 seed in the AL and be a series win away from the ALCS.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's not even something that I believe a rational person could have predicted back in March, right? Even through spring training, you felt good about what they did. I think my season prediction was like 80 and 82. I thought they'd take a big jump forward, but we were talking about a 56 win team. They didn't go add Shohei Ohtani. They didn't go add, the best of the bunch in the rotation, but they got enough pieces. They've paired them well with the young guys. They were already, maturing here in Kansas City. And the fact they are within not even striking distance, they are within punching distance at this point. Like I said, they win tomorrow, they're in first place, and they have a chance to go for a 4-game sweep in Cleveland. And that's the last time you have to go to Cleveland this year, unless you saw them again in the postseason. I mean, it is about as wild as a ride as I can remember. This is different than 2014. This is different than 2015. And I know there's that stigma about young teams. Baltimore had it last year going into the playoffs of, well, they don't know how to play in the postseason. They haven't done it before. There's a lot of young guys that don't have that experience. I think what's good for the Royals, though, is that exact point. They don't know about the pressure, and I don't think they care about the pressure. They've got a lot of guys that just welcome that. I mean, Bobby Witt Jr. back in February said, I asked him about this pressure. Now you got a contract. You are seen as the guy. You are seen as one of the best players in baseball. Do you like that pressure? And he's like, yeah, I like all of it. I want that type of pressure. And here he is having one of the best seasons. In fact, he will have the best season in Royals history and probably fall a little bit short to Aaron Judge. I hate to say it, but that's just, we know the way it's going to go. But I like the fact that they have these guys that are so confident and they don't really get rattled. We can talk about lack of focus defensively and all of that. I've never got this feeling that they look rattled or outmatched. They might not play well or have a good matchup against a good team, but I can't wait to see what they would be able to do in October, whether it be on the road or at home. They've got the crowd behind them, or they can go play spoilers somewhere else. Because after tonight, man, how can you not feel like running through a wall? I mean, this team should have everybody jumping on the bandwagon again, even more so than there was back in 2014. If you were still doubting going into the day of they could fall apart, they're going to have a 6.5 game lead for a playoff spot and could jump into first place tomorrow. And then we start talking about Man, what if you get a first round bye? I mean, are you kidding me? A team that was second worst in baseball last year gets a first round bye in the playoffs in a year, I might add, Braden, where 3 of the damn teams in their own division make the playoffs. They had to earn it this year. It wasn't like last year where you could win this thing with 86 effing wins, right? They had to play well all season long and not bottom out, and they haven't done that, at least to this point.
Dude, it is insane. They lost 106 games last year. And obviously they go make the moves. They get Lugo, they get Waka, Hunter Renfroe, and Vegas still has their win total at, I don't know it off the top of my head. It was low 70s, 73 and a half, we'll say. Yep. They're at 74 with 30 games left. They made all those moves and their win total was still in the low 70s, and they're there with 30 games to go. And like you said, you have 18 or whatever games against Cleveland, against Minnesota, teams that are going to make the playoffs. Like, this is unbelievable. 106 losses last year. Now you're talking about a bye. And obviously you win Friday night against Philly. Saturday night, you drop pop-ups. You're making a bunch of mistakes. Yesterday, You're doing the same things. You're misfielding grounders, whatever. It was a bunch of stupid things that playoff teams shouldn't do. And you're 3 games back again after getting it to 1, and you're going into today like, dude, if they lose both, they're 5 back with 30 to go, and they do the exact opposite. They win both, and they're 1 back with 5 more games against this same club. Obviously, you got to fight off Minnesota, who we got to talk about it. I believe they were down 9-1 in a rain delay in the second, so hopefully they finish 5 and finish that game, and then you're what? How many games would we be? Okay, how many games are we up on Minnesota if they lose?
That would be, I think, a game and a half up on Minnesota if they don't come back from their 8-run deficit. And Boston lost again. So officially, they have a playoff spot by 6.5 games. I mean, it's just getting to that point now where, I mean,
do you even talk about the wild card?
I mean, I thought Jeff Montgomery put out a really good point yesterday, I think it was. And he was like, I wouldn't focus on the wild card. I'm focused on the division. The rest will take care of itself. And I think that's a fair point, right? If you're looking at Cleveland and you're gaining ground on Cleveland, well, obviously you're doing good things in the wild card race. And you look at 30 games to go here. And Boston, who's had the worst bullpen in baseball in the second half, they were using Brad Keller in a high leverage spot tonight. It backfired. He gave up 5 runs in that 1 inning. If they're using Brad Keller in a high leverage spot, how are they going to make up 6.5 games? I could always be wrong. I'll knock on wood here so everybody can hear it. But that's what I was telling people yesterday when there was this sense of dread of they just got their ass kicked twice by Philadelphia. Now they've got Cleveland. Boston's only back 4.5 games. I mean, it could take one bad week and they're out of a playoff spot. But in my mind, I'm going, what about what Boston has done in the last 30 days has given you hope if you're a Red Sox fan that they're going to catch Kansas City? I mean, Kansas City has kept them at arm's length now for a couple of weeks. It really wasn't until they came to Kansas City where within half a game, we left the night before, right? That Cole Reagan start, Braden. We went to the game. They lost by 1. They had coughed, or they had chances late. They didn't come through. Boston was a half a game back. That was the last time it was remotely close. It was remotely close at all. And they've just run away with it since then. And I think somebody was telling me they're going, well, you know, Boston's got Toronto and they've got the White Sox. Toronto just won 2 games in the doubleheader at Fenway Park. They've lost 5 straight games at Fenway Park. So I looked at that and said, okay, I feel confident the Royals are getting in at this point, because collapsing when you haven't really collapsed all season long in the final 30 games, it could happen. Baseball's random. Baseball's weird. And I think for Royals' bad luck, would it really shock anybody? No. But this team, to me, they're just different, man. Like I said, they were booting the ball around against Philadelphia. Hell, they were terrible to start the game tonight. And do you think anybody in that dugout was feeling like, oh, no, thanks, Dyrone, for misplaying that? No, I think they came into the dugout and said, 3 runs is totally fine. We'll make that up quickly. And they had the lead 3 innings later. Like, that's just who they are. They don't dwell on something that just happened. And might I add, when they do something well, they don't dwell on it. They're already focused to the next inning, the next game, the next series. And that's what makes them dangerous. They are a young group that has that confidence. They can flush things quickly. And it's a combination of those young guys doing this for the first time and the playoff guys who have sort of mentored them throughout this of, here's how we got to get through it, right? We got to take it series by series, game by game. And Matt Quatrero's, t-shirt he's wearing yesterday said today. It's all about today, which was take this doubleheader, sweep this doubleheader, and then tomorrow, we're not worried about that anymore. Whatever we did yesterday does not matter anymore. It's about today. And after that game, win or lose, it's about the next day. And if you take that approach and they keep this cushion, man, that's a lethal weapon to have, a lethal mentality to have when you're rolling into October.
Yeah, and just back to the wild card, like I honestly felt silly just giving Twitter an update when Boston lost the first one today, because the wild card does feel like wraps. Like it feels like the Royals do have a playoff spot. Knock on wood, obviously. But there's 30 games to go. You're up 6.5. Like Boston would have to win so many games. Royals would have to have an epic collapse, and they have some easier opponents to end the year. I wanted to give you a Fangraphs update. I'm sure you already know, but the crowd that's here after the Royals win, this isn't factoring Boston's loss, but Fangraphs has given the Royals an 88% chance to make the playoffs. And that doesn't have Boston's loss yet. Division, they're giving the Royals a 26.8% chance to win the division. So, yeah, you're a game back. You got 5 more against Cleveland, and Twins should lose tonight. So that's all those percentages aren't even factoring in the Twins. So I'm wondering where our playoff percentages will go when the Twins do lose for the division and just making the playoffs. But I wanted to throw a scenario, and I don't want it to backfire, but how ideal would it be for the Royals to get the 2 seed? And maybe this isn't even possible, but they get the 2 seed and they play the Cleveland Guardians in the second round in the ALDS.
I mean, it'd be hard not to like that matchup, because I question, who's Cleveland throwing in game 1, game 2, and game 3, and game 4. I can't even piece together the rotation right now. They don't have a stable rotation, and I think Guardians fans would tell you that. They've got guys that I love Tanner Bybee. They'll see in game 4. I really like Gavin Williams in the overall stuff, but the numbers aren't quite there. I mean, if you have to run Logan Allen out there in game 4, I mean, look what the Royals did tonight. Maybe things can change if the Royals do succumb to that pressure. I don't see it that way. I mean, this is a great spot to be in. You've now pretty much dwindled it down in the American League to a not even a 3-horse race for the final wild card spot. I mean, Boston being 6.5. I mean, hell, Seattle's caught them now at 6.5. So at this point, maybe you go back to watching Boston and Seattle. And for all these playoff matchups, I did get asked this question before about teams you'd want to see and teams you wouldn't want to see. Cleveland, I think, is one of those teams you'd want to see because I think the Royals match up well against them. I thought when they were still a third wild card team, I'd be all right playing the Yankees and the Bronx, and I'd be all right playing Baltimore and Camden, because those would be the 2 teams in the American League that have all of the pressure in the world. The Yankees can't fall short of the World Series this year. That's just the immense. I mean, Aaron Judge playing at the MVP level, Juan Soto, who knows if he's back next year. They got off to such a good start. Look, it's been since 2009 since they've won a World Series. So they've got World Series or bust expectation. Baltimore won 100+ last year, were the 100 or the number 1 seed in the American League, and they got swept by the Rangers immediately out of the postseason. They go in and get swept or lose the opening series, whether that be wild card or ALDS, if they find a way to win the East. Like, that's a huge stain on what they've been able to accomplish in the first 2 years of this window. To me, the one team I don't want to run into, and maybe it's just the bad juju, the bad feeling around this team, I don't think I'd want to see Houston. I think Houston, and right now the Royals would go to Baltimore. If they're the third wild card team, they will go to Houston because Houston's going to win that division. But the Astros are a different breed. We want to talk about playoff teams. They're like Kansas City, the Chiefs, in the NFL. Like, going into last year, there were people that said, they're not good enough. They have these holes, excuses. But they're a playoff team. They turn things on when the playoff lights shine down on them. And the Astros feel that way this year. They got hot at the right time. No, they're not a loaded team, But you think I want to see them go to Minute Maid Park and play the play the Astros? Probably not, man. I'd probably try to find any single way to avoid them. And the best way to do that would be winning this damn division, which they still have a really good chance to. But overall, man, and I mean, there's really only one team I really don't want to see. I would welcome the challenge of the Yankees. I'd welcome the challenge of Minnesota, Cleveland, Baltimore, whoever the hell it would be. Houston's that one team where I think next to the Royals, they have the least amount of pressure because of how many times they've succeeded in the postseason. This is like the team that came back from the dead. Oh, if they get there, roll the dice again. If it doesn't work out, hey, we'll be fine next year. We know that we can put ourselves in a hole and come back and win this division because nobody else in the AL West is threatening us.
Exactly. Yeah. Houston, it's just like a mentality that rubs off on everyone in that club. Like you just Altuve, Bregman, and Jordan alone. And yeah, it's like the Chiefs last year. You got to go on the road in Buffalo, in Baltimore, and it just doesn't matter. Like Houston can go on the road and they have the experience. Obviously, Verlander, maybe he's a little washed and getting old, but even that's a guy that he's been in the postseason. They got a bunch of vets. When I pin questions on here, can you see them?
Yeah, I just saw that one.
I want you to answer this one.
Okay.
So Eric, for audio listeners, Eric says, can you give a quick explanation on what the playoff bracket looks like? I know 3 division winners plus 3 wild cards, but more so seeding, home, away, and then how many game series?
Yeah, so if we're just going to go what it looks like right now, you've got New York as the 1, and you've got Cleveland as the 2, and you'd have Houston as the 3. So that means that New York and Cleveland would get the bye to the American League Divisional Series, and then Houston would be hosting Minnesota, who's the 3rd wild card team right now. Houston would host Minnesota for a best of 3. So the wild card game is dead and gone. It's not going to be a winner take all, just one game. It'll be a best of 3. However, that best of 3 is taking place all at the higher seeds, stadium. So Houston would get all 3 games at home. It's not a 1-1-1. Houston gets all 3 games at home, so Minnesota would have to go on the road. If the season ended today, Kansas City would have to go to Camden Yards to take on Baltimore. Again, all 3 of those games happening in Baltimore. And if I'm not mistaken, that lines it up where Minnesota and Houston would go on. The winner of that would go on to play the Yankees, and the winner of Kansas City and Baltimore would go on to play the Guardians in a best of 5 ALDS. So after the wild card series, everything is what it used to be. It's a best of 5 for the ALDS, best of 7 for the ALCS, and then you have the World Series, of course.
I just learned a lot today because I don't think I even knew that. And that's kind of what I was saying at the beginning is we haven't experienced the playoffs as Royals fans, at least watching our team since 2015. I'm sure some people still watched the playoffs. I was going to talk about the 2 matchups the next 2 days. And I wanted to tell the audience, like Jack he's such a baseball nerd that we went to the game a month ago or so, and he knew the whole series and pitchers' tendencies and how our offense would hit certain pitchers. So I just wanted to talk about both ways, like how the offenses line up. Cleveland against Michael Lorenzen tomorrow, and then obviously the Royals against Gavin Williams tomorrow. And then I guess talk about Wednesday, Michael Wacha against Tanner Bybee, which is another afternoon game on Wednesday.
Yeah, I mean, tomorrow, you look at somebody like Gavin Williams. I think he's had the Royals number, if I'm not mistaken, the few times that he's faced him. But he struggled in his last, 5 to 7 outings or so. And Michael Lorenzen's been really good in the Royals uniform. I thought that his last outing against the Angels, it was really good. I mean, 7 shutout innings. I'm not going to, poo-poo any of that. But he was, I think, fortunate to face a bad lineup. And Cleveland doesn't have a world-beating lineup, but still, they're going to be much of an upgrade over the Angels lineup that he saw. So to me, it's going to come down once again to what this Royals offense looks like in the first 3 innings. Do they look like what they did, against the Guardians bullpen arms today in game 1, where it was a sluggish start? Or is it going to be like today, where they were tagging Logan Allen every pitch he threw in every single inning, and Salvador Perez is hitting balls 470 feet? That's, to me, what I'm going to be looking at. Because I can probably count on Michael Lorenzen to give the Royals 5 to 6 innings and keep it under 4 runs. And if you do that, you certainly want to be going into the final 3 innings with 1 or 2 or 3 run lead, because you're going to have some of those guys that are rested up again. You didn't have to use John Schreiber in game 2. You didn't have to use Bubic. You didn't have to use Ursig. You were able to get away with Daniel Lynch, who was phenomenal tonight.
3 innings scoreless.
I think picks up the save, if I'm not mistaken. So Daniel Lynch, to me, tip my cap. He comes up in a spot like this, and hey, just get outs, man. It's a 5-run game. Throw strikes, get outs, get us out of here, and we'll lock this thing down. And if Angel Serpa is out of gas, maybe Daniel Lynch is the guy you turn to as that lefty out of the bullpen, or you keep him up, or you bring Serpa back and you use Daniel Lynch there to, take the spot of Will Smith, who's on the injured list. I don't want to speculate or anything. Might be a phantom IL stint. Might actually be back spasms. I don't really know. And then you look at game 4. I mean, Michael Wacha has been the Royals' most consistent arm now for, 2 months or so. Really since June 1st, he's been the Royals' most consistent arm. And ERA that's in the low 2.2s. He grinds through everything. And actually, that's a bad term to use because grinding would be, throwing 100 pitches in 5 innings. He's a smooth operator, man. I mean, he's doing exactly what he did last year for San Diego. Like, I think when you are JJ Picollo and you're going to sign guys, you're signing them based off what they did last year, right? You're giving them the money for what they did last year. And Michael Wacha had a carbon copy 2024 comparing it to his 2023. Bad start in April. ERA didn't look good. And then from May 1st on was perfect. Was quality start after quality start after quality start. And I think he ended up with a 3.22 ERA in San Diego last year, but not as many innings as he's thrown for Kansas City. And he also missed time this year twice, actually once for an extended period middle of the season. And then he didn't start the year until like game 3 or game 4 because he had that fracture, or not the fracture in his hand, got a bruised hand from a comebacker in spring training on the very last day. So he's gotten banged up a few times and still is going to shatter his, inning total from last year. I mean, I would put money on Michael Wacha in game 4, regardless of what happens in game 3, because that's how damn good he looks. And I think it's a really good matchup against Cleveland.
Speaking of putting money, I thought it was a little disrespectful to make. I saw one book had Cleveland minus 150 tonight with Logan Allen on the mound.
Yeah, I almost wonder is because of how Alec Marsh looked. In his last couple starts in Kansas City, and then he was kind of he was the 27th man coming up. And they probably looked at that and said, well, he's the 27th man. Don't expect him to go that deep into the game. And Logan Allen always gets great run support, and he got that early on in the game, but then only one run, after the first inning there. So they did exactly what they needed to do. They've got everybody feeling fired up. Again, I think when you look at the American League, it's not to say that I'm not scared of the Yankees showed regular season, and we're going to get another chance at that when they go to the Bronx here in a few weeks. Juan Soto and Aaron Judge should scare everybody. The Yankees should scare you. Baltimore and Gunnar Henderson should scare you, right? But I think it's just the feeling you have going in. Like, I have this dream scenario of the Royals going to the Bronx, repping the all baby blues to honor the 1980s, and go in there and win a series, man. I'm not putting money on anything like that, but I love that challenge. I love any type of challenge this team could face in the postseason, because I don't want it to be this scenario where they, have this, kind of boring matchup in the first round, which I really don't think there can be. I like all the teams right now in the playoff picture. There's not really a bad one that would sneak into the postseason unless, Cleveland just bottoms out and they barely limp into the finish line. They're still a team that can be dangerous because of that bullpen. But I just love the spot that they're in right now because of the simple fact that they don't have the pressure on them. Even in this 30-game stretch, what I loved about hearing of this gauntlet and everything, and, talking to players, talking to Matt Quatrero about gauntlet, I don't think they look at it as a gauntlet because they view themselves on the same, level playing field with these teams. They don't look at Cleveland and go, that's big bad Cleveland. That's the first place team. We're really at odds going in there. This will be a miracle if we can win a few. No, they go in thinking, they probably woke up this morning saying, yeah, we're taking both these games, man. This is what we're taking both these games. We're taking game 3. We're taking game 4. And if they don't, all right, we'll take game 4 then. Going into the Bronx where it's going to be packed and it's going to be colder weather, playoff weather in New York, they're not going to go in there looking like a deer in headlights. And there's been this, the talk all year long of they can't beat good teams. They can't beat playoff teams. Well, that's someone Minnesota struggled with this year and Cleveland struggled with this year. But the fact they're so far ahead of schedule from where they were supposed to be this year, there was going to be some growing pains. But today, as big of a series as this was, as big of a day as this was, this might have been the single most impressive individual day they've had in 2024. And I'm not trying to be a prisoner of the moment, but today they could have very well lost their chance at winning the Central. If Cleveland sweeps that doubleheader, it's over. You're not overcoming 5 games in 30 days, even with 2 more to go and 5 more total against Cleveland. That's just, you're not coming back, because I wouldn't have confidence they would win the final 2 games of that series. I would look at it and say, try to salvage 1 and stay afloat and keep Boston away from you. But now it's completely shifted focus. And, I told myself I was not going to focus on Cleveland or first place until it was down to a game. Well, here we are, Braden. They win tomorrow, they're in first place because they've got that tiebreaker over Cleveland. They would be in first place on August 27th and have one of the best run differentials in all of baseball.
Yes. I wanted to circle back to our bullpen because I really with what they're given and who they have in that pen, I don't know how they could have been better today. And obviously, Reagan's left the game early. His pitch count was high anyways. He was going to come out probably rather quickly after that. So the bullpen had to go 5 innings in game 1. They had to go pretty long tonight too. I mean, Marsh didn't go very deep. They went 9+ innings and only gave up 1 earned run. Daniel Lynch, obviously, people said it in the chat and on Twitter, like he's the unsung hero of today. 3 innings scoreless, and you save all those arms. Like if Lynch gets in a jam there and you have to bring in Urseg, not the end of the world, but now you get a fresh Urseg for tomorrow. Or if you don't have to use them tomorrow, obviously you got them for Wednesday too. So the bullpen was as good as you could be. I thought MacArthur looked sharp. Johnny Schreiber looked like he has a little more juice. I guess talk about the pen today and talk about what you're seeing from Schreiber since he came off the IL too.
Yeah, I think the most important part about John Schreiber is that he's fully healthy. I mean, when he came off the injured list, he said, "This is the best I've felt, all season long." I think he had mentioned that he had been battling that, that knee problem he'd had for a while. And I think when you saw him fight command and he was in that big time struggle back in June, I'm sure it was bothering him a little bit. But today, that might be the best John Schreiber's looked all season long. I mean, his fastball was running up 93, 94. That felt like it was up a tick or two. He was throwing strikes. He was getting the soft contact. And it allows you to dream a little bit, because I wonder, there was a point in time in the season when John Schreiber just couldn't be trusted in high leverage roles again. Same thing with James MacArthur, who I do believe has looked better since relinquishing the closer's role. I mean, I think that it's not a big sample size, but you can dream a little bit and say, all right, if James MacArthur goes back to April form and John Schreiber comes back to April form, and let's say the time off really helps Hunter Harvey, now there's a handful of guys in the bullpen you go, okay, I'm fine with them getting the 6th or the 7th inning. I mean, there's 5 guys right there. Lucas Urseg's your Wade Davis type of guy. That biggest moment, it goes to him. You want it to be in the 9th inning, but sometimes the 7th, sometimes it's the 8th. Then you can go to John Schreiber in the 8th, or you can go to Hunter Harvey if he comes back strong, or you can go to Sam Long in the 7th, or you can go to Chris Bubich in the 7th. Maybe you can go to James MacArthur in the 6th inning if he really starts to build up that trust again. I mean, there's 5 guys that you can start to build that confidence in, and maybe your 6th guy is Daniel Lynch, and he gives you what he did tonight. Maybe your 7th guy is Carlos Hernandez, who in a 93 game can go pump 101 by guys. I'm not saying this bullpen is fixed. It's really good. Nothing like that. But you can dream and squint a little and go, it's not as bad when they are firing, when they are building off each other. I thought game 1 today was a perfect example of that. They came in there, they attacked hitters, they looked good, they worked themselves out of jams. Game 2, didn't really need to because it was 9-4 basically by the time the bullpen really started working into that game. But tomorrow, I mean, again, when Hunter Harvey comes back, and hopefully he didn't have a setback when he was resuming throwing last Friday, but if he comes back and he's rested up and he can still run it up 98, 99 and give you what he was giving Washington early on in the year, man, you can start to dream a little bit about having a more consistent 7, 8, and 9 guy and not have to rely on Lucas Ursig going in the 6th or the 7th inning. You can turn it over to Schreiber. You can turn it over to MacArthur, or you can turn it over to Harvey. And that, to me, will be the difference in them winning a playoff series and being sent home early or collapsing down the stretch. If this bullpen looks like what it did today, there's 0 chance that anybody catches them in the playoff race. And if they really get into a hot stretch in September, you could argue is them being the one or two teams you do not want to face on the American League side, whether it be in the wild card series or the divisional series.
Absolutely. Yeah, and like you said, for a month now, 1,000 times, they get to the playoffs, they're playing with house money. Even if they do get that bye, who cares? You lose in the play. Like we've talked about, we just want this young core to experience winning, learn how to win. If they do lose in the playoffs, who cares? Like there's sure they could blow a series lead where they're up a couple games, but you're playing with house money regardless. I wanted to give one more guy a shout out. The Royals have been on like a 1 for 28 stretch with runners in scoring position. And Garrett Hampson kind of opened that up tonight with a base hit to center. He had 3 hits. I got to give him some credit because I've absolutely murdered him on Twitter. Not murdered him, but I've been like very tough on him. So I feel bad. Some Royals Twitter has been too. I mean, he dropped a pop up to start the game last week. He had struggled at the plate. So huge shouts out to him because I really think he opened it up today. And then I wanted to ask you, gun to your head, do the Royals end up winning the AL Central?
Oh, such a good question. A really, really good question. Because I think when I was asked this before, or maybe it was right after the game on Friday against Philadelphia, and they were down to a game again, I said no because they still have Houston at Minute Maid. But I start to wonder if this comes down to a fact of more of Cleveland crumbling than the Royals catching fire. I mean, I don't want to be too, I don't really want to lean into the prisoner of the moment ideology or the recency bias type of thing, because they did just get their ass kicked back-to-back days on Saturday and Sunday. And I don't want one day to dictate that none of that happened. Oh, I'm focused on tomorrow now. I think that they're going to run away with this series. I still will say no, because I think in the end, Minnesota is going to have a really good chance to. I really believe that Minnesota is going to be able to have the extra firepower. However, you asked me this question on Thursday. If they sweep Cleveland and they've got a little bit of a cushion and Minnesota gets beaten up by Atlanta, I'll probably change my answer. I know it's not fair to do because this is more so about making the prediction right now. I think it would be no, but it's going to come down to the final week. I said for a long time, the final playoff spot will come down to that final week in September. I think now that may get wrapped up like 2 weeks before the season ends. However, for the champion of the AL Central, I think that goes all the way up until that final week. Every time you think Cleveland's down and out, they seem to fight their way off the ropes. Same thing with Minnesota. And probably they say the same thing about the Royals. But yeah, I just think because of that schedule, who they have left, if they get out of there and they play 12-8 over those 20 games, hard not to make the Royals your prediction. But to me, I'm just focusing on go 500 in that stretch. You'll be just fine. Seems like everybody else is taking care of themselves. And see what you can do in October, man, because this has been the type of season that every Royals fan has dreamed of. Probably for just 9 straight years. I mean, even after the World Series, you felt just starved in 2016 when they went 500. They went 81-81, and they couldn't make that final push. 2017, same thing. They made those moves. They traded for Trevor Cahill and Brandon Maurer and Ryan Buchter and brought in Melky Cabrera. It didn't work out. 2018, 100 losses. 2019, 100 losses. COVID year didn't happen. 2021, they made the moves, but they won 74 games, something this team just matched tonight with their 74th win. 2022, another punt year. They lose nearly 100 games. Last year, they tied the 2005 Royals with 106 losses. It's going to be that feeling again of the crisp air coming in. You're believing in this. And what's even more exciting is going into free agency, there's now a selling point to come to Kansas City. You get to play with Bobby Witt Jr. You get to play with Salvador Perez. And you'll have a front office, might I add, which is important to a lot of guys. They'll give you a chance at the playoffs. JJ going out there and making moves. I remember at the time, there were some people on Twitter going, they shouldn't do it this year. They know they're not a playoff team. They should punt on the season. Little do you know is that goes a long way with the players. I mean, the guys they brought in, Michael Wacha's got an opt-out this year. If he pitches well and the clubhouse feels good, and then JJ McCullough says, I don't believe in you guys. I'm not mortgaging away the future. And they'll go, okay, screw it. I'm not coming back here next year. and you tell Bobby Witt Jr., who, though you don't have to worry about him leaving anytime soon, down the road, he'll remember years like that where you go, yeah, you didn't give us a chance. You promised me when you signed me to extension, you were going to give us a winner here and you were going to build around me. JJ did that this year. He was willing to give away pieces, and he brings in Lucas Ursing. He brings in Paul DeYoung. Hunter Harvey really hasn't worked out, but there still is time. Michael Lorenzen, he's worked out. They made moves like that, and now you look at that, and Juan Soto in right field. I mean, it's great to know that, A, they'll spend the money. John Sherman's willing to spend the money, but they can make that pitching point. Hey, you come here, and you're giving this team a fighting chance. We are going to give you a shot. We're going to go acquire guys to help you get that last push. And, Salvador Perez last year, a year ago, I think there was that strong belief
multiple years.
He's not going to get a chance. Yeah, there was. I didn't believe that Salvi was going to get another chance at Kansas City because they'd failed 2 rebuilds. Like, there were 2 failed rebuilds after 2015, and Salvi had gotten to the point where he said, all right, I'll go if it makes the Royals better. I'd prefer not to, but I'll waive my 10-5 rights and go to Texas. That was that story that came out. I want to say Rustin Dodd did it, or maybe it was Ken Rosenthal. I can't quite remember. But Salvador Perez was getting to a point in his career, and he's saying, I want to get back there. I want to have a chance. And what he's doing this year, I don't know if I'll comment on him being a Hall of Famer or not, but to do this, he is going to be, on the American League side at least, one of these storylines. Because back in 2014 and 15, Salvi was the face of the Royals. And here he is in 2024, not quite the face because of Bobby Witt Jr., but he's having a career year again. And he's doing it, and he's healthy, and all that stuff is really, really exciting. And I think best thing for him is that he loves this city so much. And I don't think he wanted to go play in October for somebody else. I think he wanted to see this through and have another chance. And that was a big part, I believe, of J.J. Picollo and John Sherman making the moves they did, not just to help out the young guys, but to show Salvi, hey, since we kept you here, we're going to honor that commitment by giving you multiple shots to go out there and compete for another World Series.
It gives me chills talking about Salvi and just listening to people talk about him, because you said it. He means so much to Kansas City, and obviously we win the World Series in 2015. He's the MVP. Since then, you recapped every year. Hasn't been much winning, and I've just had this feeling all year when they're winning these games that down the stretch, Salvi is going to be an absolute menace at the plate. Like the year where he hits 50-plus homers, he's just locked in, squaring everything up. That team obviously didn't win a ton, but I've just felt like if the Royals are going to be in contention, Salvi's going to go on these crazy streaks. He's going to put together crazy at-bats. And then today, you see it, the biggest series of the year. He has 13 total bases, and he walked twice. We talk about how much he swings at pitches and doesn't take walks. He walked twice. He just looks locked in. He hit a bunch of balls hard in that Philadelphia series. Like, just visioning and picturing him in October coming up in big spots just gives me chills, and I want to see it so badly. I think we're going to see it, and I can just picture him hitting a couple go-ahead homers or just whatever he ends up doing. But I want to see him locked in October, and I can't wait to see him back in the postseason.
I mean, I think if you're a baseball fan, it sounds biased because we're, of course, here in Kansas City, but it feels like to me that Salvi's going to be one of those guys that, baseball is just going to root for it and kind of feel this sense of nostalgia, that he's out there and starting and playing in playoff games. And that was something I feel like a lot of baseball fans were kind of writing off back in 2020 and 2021. It was the Royals are nowhere close. They have a terrible farm system. They have Mike Matheny at the helm. They fired Mike Matheny, and then they lose 106 games last year. Salvi's still on that team. He can't stay healthy. This will be awesome to see, whether the Royals are at Kauffman Stadium or in the Bronx or at Camden Yards or at Minute Maid Park, and they do those starting lineup introductions for the wild card series or the divisional series, and they get a lineup just like they do on opening day. And Salvi's going to be up there on the Jumbotron, warming up somebody in the bullpen. And if they get a game at Kauffman Stadium, I get chills thinking about it. The type of roar from the crowd they'll get when he's announced. I mean, Bobby's going to get a pretty big roar. Salvi's going to get a deafening roar, louder than he even got back in 2014 and 15, because he's been the face, or he was the face for a decade plus. I believe that he was the face right there with Hosmer back in 2015, even though he wasn't the best player Kane was. But Salvi was the face. He was on all the commercials. He was the one with the Salvi splash and hugging Joel and making or poking fun at Lorenzo and poking fun at Giordano and all of that. He's such an easy guy to root for, and he is so deserving of a run like this again. And it's even better that he's playing like this. It'd be one thing if it was like Miguel Cabrera in his final years in Detroit of just, washed up at that point and not really giving you much. Salvi's been arguably the best catcher in the American League this year, even better than Adley Rutschman, who started over him in the All-Star game. And Salvi's, a decade older than him? A few years older than that? It's just ridiculous. I mean, I'm not trying to say he will be or won't be a Hall of Famer, but we're all going to remember Salvador. Many people in baseball are going to remember Salvador Perez because of the type of catcher he was. I mean, he wasn't supposed to be this good at 34 because of his size. He was supposed to be probably a DH at this point or a first baseman. He does all three right now, and he's still behind the plate, and he is putting in my opinion, the best season of his career. I know he had the 49 home run, 120-plus RBI season. I'm going one step further because that team wasn't good. This team is good. These games matter late, and he's doing stuff like he did tonight. I mean, my God, that 470 feet grand slam off of one of the better arms in Cleveland's bullpen. I mean, Jesus, you can't really say.
And then Bobby takes Gaddis yard earlier. Gaddis has been unbelievable in that bullpen. We know how good Cleveland's bullpen's been. Bobby hits a game-winning homer after the bullpen gave up just one run, the only run they gave up all day. Bobby hits a game-winning homer off Hunter Gaddis, which obviously Rex Hudler had the best call of all time. Scream that he gave up 3 homers and screams 4 right when he hits it. But yeah, he takes Gaddis deep, and then Salvi hits the $25,000 grand slam tonight. It's just unbelievable. And that's their bullpen. Cleveland's bullpen's been unbelievable, and the Royals did whatever they had to do against that pin tonight. I wanted to circle back kind of to the division, and I know you probably got to get off here soon to go do your pod, but you talked about Minnesota winning it, and I feel like people underestimate this, but we have just been so bad at Target Field. I think you and other people got to remember that 3-game series is in Kansas City. And I talked about it. You chip away at that 20-game stretch. There's 5 games done. They're 3-2. They got 5 more against Cleveland. So 33% of those games are against Cleveland. How do you feel about the 15-game stretch coming up? What would be, I guess, like best case in your mind? What would be worst case?
I mean, at 3-2 right now, 5 games in, I still think if they go 7-8, I'll take 7-8 over these next 15 because that puts you at 10-10. That keeps you 15 games over 500 with 15 games to go. I mean, at that point, you're safe, right? I think if you go 500 or 1 game under 500 these next 15, you are safe. You would have to lose likely 13 of 15 to close out the year, and that would still mean Boston playing some good baseball in that stretch. So to me, just to be safe to get into October, I think going 7-8 is just fine. And that still may be, way too much. Maybe you could go I don't want to see them play less than that or, going 5-10 or something like that. I just don't have confidence Boston's going to play good baseball during that stretch. So maybe 5-10 is still good enough because that would make you 8-12 in the 20-game stretch. That's technically treading water. But best case scenario, I would say going, 9-6 over these next 15, just because these are some really, really good opponents. You go 9-6, that puts you at, what would that be? My math is terrible. That'd be 12-8. 12-8 in that 20-game stretch is so impressive considering all the top dogs you were facing in the American League. So that's, I think, the best case scenario. Don't want to get too greedy and say 10-5 because going, 13-7, it feels like, or 14-6, it's just being too greedy, in my opinion. I think if they play 2 games over 500, 11-9 in those 20 games, that's remarkable. That's one of the most impressive stretches, even though maybe record-wise it wouldn't be. To go 11-9 against the teams they would be facing with the playoffs on the line, that would be just so incredible, considering the pressure they had from Royals fans, what they had on deck, everybody knowing that was the gauntlet part 2 and would dictate whether October baseball was going to happen or not. That to me feels like the scenario here. But if they win these next two in Cleveland, I don't think it's likely. I think they should just, not to get too greedy to play into that. You take 3 or 4, you feel good about it. You would leave. What is that tie? Or no, you'd be in first place because of that tiebreaker over Cleveland. But you
People
take
forget about
2
that.
of
You're
those, you win the last 2
6-2
here.
against Cleveland.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're 6-2 against Cleveland. You win the final 2 games of the series. I know that's a bit of a stretch, but at that point, you are 5-2 with 13 games to go. Is it really outlandish at that point to say they win 7 more games of the 13 to go 7-6 over those 13 games? Not really. If they take 4 straight from Cleveland with one of those days being a doubleheader, yeah, I think 7-6 for those next 13, or maybe even 8-5 is absolutely doable, because I certainly didn't think sweeping the Guardians this late in the series in their own stadium would be doable.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I guess I'm just looking at schedules now. A couple more notes is Cleveland and Minnesota have a 4-game set against each other. I guess that could always hurt us or help us. And then just the last series of the season for everyone. Like you talked about it coming down to the final weekend. The Twins play the Orioles their last 3 games. Cleveland has Houston their last 3, and then we have the Braves in Atlanta the last 3. Like that's 2 pretty tough series for the other Central teams I talked about, but it really could come down to the final weekend this season.
Oh yeah, I do think that Central race is going to be. Oh, sorry, yeah, no, I was cutting in and out there with you, but no, that Central race is going to be crazy, man. I mean, I think there's going to be so many moments over this final month where you think one team's running away with it, and then they'll have a bad series. Somebody else gets hot. Somebody starts crumbling again. I believe the Central winner is going to be decided in that final week. And Royals will have, I think, the Nationals and the Braves back-to-back to close out the year, and the Giants right before that in their final regular season home series of the year. I just think it's one of those spots where the Royals are very fortunate to be in this type of race. I mean, I feel bad for somebody like Detroit, because Detroit made strides this year, and it won't be recognized because the Royals have been this good, and Cleveland's been this good, and Minnesota's been this good. That's what makes baseball great, man. This is the perfect time to be having a season like this, because baseball's been phenomenal. There's been so many great storylines, both in the American League and the National League. Some really, really good teams, some fan bases that have been deprived, but I'm not sure there's been one team more deprived on the American League side in terms of just postseason action than the Royals. Cleveland's had their chances in the last couple of years. Minnesota had theirs last year. New York has not struggled of late. Baltimore hasn't struggled, and Houston not either. I mean, the Royals are that team that's been in a 9-year drought. This is their opportunity to go back again, and to imagine sitting down on your couch one day or going to a bar and gearing up for a playoff game. That euphoric feeling you had back in 14 and 15 of planning your whole day around a playoff game, and packed crowds and towels being waved and 50-degree temperatures. I mean, that's within grasp right now. You can taste it. You can smell it, because we are down to the final 30 games of the year, and the Royals have done such a tremendous job of putting themselves in this type of position.
Yeah, and then just one more note. There's been a couple comments about MJ's catch today, and I feel like we haven't touched on it too much during this podcast, and I feel like we haven't really talked about the importance. But that has to be the defensive play of the year for the Royals, and you got to think about this scenario. Royals are up 1 run there. He misses that ball, goes to the wall. They score 2 runs. Noel's on second or third, whatever. That might end up being a huge inning. But MJ, he hits a 3-run shot, saves 2 runs. Like that. That's the defensive play of the year for the Royals. It has to be.
I was about to say the exact same thing because of the scenario and who you were playing in terms of. Oh yeah, it's still say that the Adam Frazier catch in Detroit, like acrobatic wise, and who was actually out there was better, right? Because Adam Frazier of all people robbed one in Detroit. That Kyle Isbell catch against Tampa, I think it was back in June or July, crashed into the wall. That was up there because it was the 9th inning. But damn, I think in catch difficulty, MJ's had to be the toughest because that wasn't a line drive. That was a ball coming down, and he's running from the side, and he's laying out completely. And I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer. He misses that ball, the Royals lose that game. Like they're trailing by a run at that point, but then the Guardians have maybe even a runner at third. I know Noel hit it, so probably not, but a runner at second. The Royals are into their bullpen now. And Cleveland's got their, monsters coming out of the bullpen, and you're probably facing Class A in the ninth. And I don't feel good about that. So yes, that catch saved the game. And though I've said recency bias and all of that today in this live post-game breakdown, like I do believe circumstance, who they were up against, what that catch entailed, that was the catch of the year. And MJ's done such a phenomenal job at it, proving his craft and his skill out there. Last year was a struggle because he was a catcher in April. He practiced all offseason to be a catcher and improving his framing skills. Then the Royals said, okay, go learn the outfield. And so he's a catcher learning the outfield last year. That's tough to do at a corner spot. This offseason, I just had that feeling that he was going to be so much more improved because he's an athlete. Man, that's what everybody said about MJ Melendez. He is a pure athlete with a great arm. It can translate well. And yeah, he might be the only guy, a corner outfielder at that can make a play like that on this team. Kyle Isbell is the best outfielder on this team. I think MJ Melendez is the only guy who can make a play at a corner spot. Hunter Renfroe's not making that. Dairon Blanco sure as hell isn't making that. Garrett Hampson, maybe. Adam Frazier, no. Nick Lofton, when he was on the team, no. Go to Tyler Gentry, no. Like, that was one hell of a play. And he deserves his props there, man, because the work he's done in the outfield, I'm glad he is seeing the results like this because he has had quite the improvement in just 1 year.
And then final question, is this the best, is this the happiest, most successful day in franchise history in close than a decade?
Again, I think for this year, yes, because they were within striking distance and now they're within punching distance of the division. And I think what it meant if they got swept today, they can't win the Central. They're not doing it 5 games back, even with 5 more to go against Cleveland, because what confidence would you have beating Cleveland tomorrow or the day after that after getting swept in a doubleheader when the Guardians had a bullpen game and then Logan Allen on the bump? I would have had no confidence at all, considering you already burned Reagans in this series and he didn't look that good, right? So to me, I don't know franchise history, but it's hard to top winning 2 games in one day, especially on the road and especially against a division rival that you're chasing who has first place in American League Central. So yeah, it is hard to find a better day in 2024 for sure, in which they've been able to accomplish something like this. And I can't wait to see what they come out and look like tomorrow, because both these games did not start well for them. They did not play well. They were booting around the ball. They didn't look flat, but they just didn't look really focused and locked in. It looked like the Phillies series 2.0, just kicking the ball around, lackadaisical play, bad at bats. And boy, they couldn't have finished game 2 stronger than what they did. And now they got game 3, all the momentum on their side. And you got to think there's a lot of a tenseness in that Cleveland clubhouse, knowing we lose tomorrow and we're not in first place anymore. We have relinquished that 10, 11 game lead that we had just months ago. And to have that type of collapse this late into the season, the Royals are the one that are the freight train on the tracks here. They're telling everybody to get off the tracks, and Cleveland's kind of that, guy that's running and limping to the finish line, just trying to survive this last stretch of the season, because they've been really bad over their last 55 games or so. They're like 9 to 10 games under 500, maybe 8 games under 500 over the last 54, 55 games. And the Royals have been 8 to 9 games over 500 in their last 50 to 55 games. I believe that's what the stat was. But yeah, what an accomplishment they had today. I certainly didn't think it'd be a sweep, because that's really hard to do on the road. But they've done it twice this year, against St. Louis and against Cleveland.
Yep. And not only do you win both, but the one team chasing you loses 2. The Twins should lose tonight. It couldn't be a more perfect day. I know you got to go do your podcast tonight, so I wanted you to just plug your social medias, plug your podcast, where people can find you, and hopefully everyone here goes and listens to whatever you have to say tonight, because I'm not going to be able to get enough Royals coverage after today.
Yeah, you can just follow me on the Twitter handle at Johnny J _15. Don't hate me. That was a default name years ago. I can't change it. It was too late to change it. So that's the username you can follow me at. We pretty much tweet Royals every single day. We live tweet the games, and we bring you podcast episodes Monday through Friday. And even though if we don't get one out tonight, like sometimes, I mean, I think we covered a lot tonight. We may not do one tonight. We might not need to because we did a good job over this, hour 15 of breaking down the game. But usually Monday through Friday, we'll bring it to you on Locked On Royals. But this has been a blast, man. No, it's anytime. Live reactions, that's something I don't do. That podcast is old news, man. We're doing the live post-game show talk right now. So, no, this has been a blast. I thank you for having me on, Braden. And, yeah, just follow me or, if you can't get enough Royals, I'll certainly try to fill that void over the final 30 games or so.
Yeah, obviously, thank you so much for coming on. I said it to start it. You're my guy. You're one of the nicest guys in the world, and I love your passion for baseball, everything Kansas City. How about we go take a series tomorrow in Cleveland, and maybe we do another live show?
Hey, why not, man? This is the time to do it. We're in a playoff push, and we should absolutely be trying to push all of the promotion we can because this team and this organization absolutely deserve it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming on, everyone. Thank you for being in here. The comments were great. Thank you for interacting. Hopefully see you guys soon. Please throw us a subscribe. We just hit 1,000. I appreciate you guys. Thank you for being in here. Go Royals.